In today's video, I'm going to be talking about 5 common autism traits that you should know about. Here we go. Well, hello there, how you doing? I hope you're doing well, and if you're brand new to my channel, I talk about autism, being autistic from my experiences, so if that sounds interesting to you and you want to see more, consider hitting that subscribe button down below and clicking that notification bell so you don't miss out on anything. And actually, if you're watching this on Facebook, because I do upload to Facebook, definitely give this page a follow and a like as well if you want to see regular content from me. And this video is about talking about the 5 most common autism traits that I personally see talked about in the autism community, and often what other people talk about when it comes to autism generally. But just before we get into the traits and talking about the traits, I do want to make some disclosures here. Not all autistic people are going to associate themselves with all of these traits. Yes, they are common themes within the community, but just because someone is autistic doesn't mean that they're going to have every trait. And also, just because an autistic person experiences some or all of these traits doesn't mean that another autistic person is going to experience things the exact same way. But most importantly, if you're not on the spectrum and you happen to stumble across this video and, you know, for whatever reason you identify with some of these traits and you feel you may be on the spectrum, or you don't know and you want to explore it more, I highly recommend talking to a medical professional, because some of the traits that I'm going to talk about can be comorbid with other conditions or link in with other conditions such as OCD, things like that. So like I say, go and seek medical advice if it's something that you are worried about or you want to explore more. Now, when I've talked to other autistic people and from what I've experienced personally, sensory sensitivities, sensory issues generally are a massive part of being on the spectrum. And because of this, I feel this is a common trait within autism generally, whether someone on the spectrum is oversensitive to a certain sense or even undersensitive. And what I mean by senses are your main senses that you have in yourself. So sight, hearing, voice, well, taste, touching things, but also in terms of pain as well. That's a sensation or a sensory sensitivity. So take me as the example. I feel like I am oversensitive when it comes to sound. I find sound a little bit overbearing sometimes, and when there's a lot of sound as well, it can be really chaotic, and I find it overly stimulating and just a bit too much. But on the flip side of this, I feel like I can be a little bit undersensitive when it comes to taste, for example, because I like a lot of different flavors in my food, and like I can obviously taste the flavors, but it's not something that I feel overly sensitive to. And also with autism, it's not always about being hypersensitive or feeling overstimulated. It can be the case that people are undersensitive to things as well. But yeah, just from my own experience, like I say, and from talking to other autistic people, I feel that sensory sensitivities generally when it comes to autism is a very common trait within the autism community generally. Now, routines, if you've been on my channel for a while, you know I like a good routine. You know, I like generally knowing what I'm going to be doing, why we're going to be doing it, you know, what's going to happen during the course of a day. Because for me, I don't like the uncertainty. I really don't like the not knowing. And from what I have realized from making these videos and from just talking to people and just understanding autism, just generally from what I've learned, some autistic people really thrive when it comes to routines and needing a routine of some description for maybe one thing or a multitude of different things, you know, doing things the same way just to ease that anxiety. Because for me, I find the world generally a little bit strange sometimes and a bit confusing and can be a little bit overwhelming. So if I know what I'm doing, when I'm going to do it, it makes it so much easier for me personally to be able to do the things that I do, and it makes me want to do things as well. But when I'm talking about repetitive behaviours, maybe it could be eating the same food or the same kind of food, or doing the same action, or saying the same things, or the same word or phrase, or doing an action in a repetitive way, which I feel could overlap into stimming and self-stimulatory behaviour. If you want to know a little bit more about that, I'll leave the video of mine that I did up there and down below in case you want to know a little bit more about that. Because like I say, the world can be a little bit overwhelming sometimes, so if people have routines in place, or you know, they do things in a certain way, it just helps them be able to understand the world around them and be able for them to cope in that situation, you know? Now, we all have our interests in life, right? You know, you have those people who really have an interest in reading books, doing pottery, walking dogs, grooming dogs, whatever interests you have, that's great, you know, that's an awesome thing. But generally, when it comes to autism and the autism community generally, one of the things that gets talked about quite often is people having special interests or focused interests. Like I say, we can all have our interests in life, but when it comes to some interests for some autistic people, it can be like, I don't know, really euphoric. It can be the only thing that you want to talk about, or the only thing that you're thinking about. And sometimes our interests can become obsessive. And the types of things that autistic people could be interested in are ever expansive. There's really no limit. Literally, you could have people who are really into books. You could have people who love to collect stamps. You know, there's various examples of special interests out there, and some of these interests could be lifelong. You know, this person may really love talking about airplanes, just as a generic example, but also interests can change and you could have fleeting interests. So someone could be obsessed with pandas, like baby pandas, for, I don't know, maybe 2 months, and then instantly change to radiators. I'm looking at a radiator right now. That's just a very generic example, but you get the idea. A special interest of mine is this whole YouTube thing. I also play in a band as well, so music is really more of a lifelong special interest of mine. I love finding out new things about music and, you know, just looking into music a bit more deeply besides just listening to it. But also there have been interests that have come and gone, such as I used to collect beer bottle caps, for example. That was something that I felt like I needed to do, and I was really wanting to collect bottle caps. I just wanted to see all of these bottle caps and see all of the different names of beer companies and things. So sometimes some of these interests may seem a bit unusual, or it might not be normal. However, when it comes to interests and stuff, I feel it's always better to encourage them in their interest, as long as they're not doing something that's dangerous or harmful. I don't see the problem personally, because when I'm talking about my interests, I feel like I'm happy, and also it's good for my own well-being, you know, having something that I can obsess over, because it just helps me focus in on the things that I love, and it makes the world a little bit less chaotic as well. And I feel that this trait in particular, you know, having a focused interest on things, is quite common in autism. Now, next two common autism traits I feel do very much interlink, but I wanted to separate them because I feel they are two separate things that I want to talk about in this video today. Now, what I mean by social interaction is when you are interacting with other people. Now, this could be considered social communication, but I feel there is a bit of a difference here, and I wanted to talk about it. You know, when you socially interact with other people, you know, you tend to pick up on signals such as the way people are talking with their hands, or, you know, body language, things like that. But when it comes to autistic people and their interpretation of social interaction, you know, it's not always typical. So just as an example, say you're going into someone's home, you know, you typically do a handshake to, you know, greet each other. However, if an autistic person is sensitive to touch or just generally does not like handshakes, then that social interaction could not go as well. It could be atypical, if you want to put it that way. Now, that example is a very general idea of what I'm trying to get across. But basically, for me, I find social interaction quite difficult because of just general social norms, like saying hello to people. Sometimes I forget that when someone walks in, you have to say hi to people. I just generally forget sometimes, especially if I'm at work and someone comes in, someone says hi, and if I'm not looking at them, or I'm working on something, sometimes I'll forget to say hi, which is a social interaction that you would typically expect. And just generally, when it comes to autism, someone may react or interact in a way that seems odd or not quite what you would expect. So really, I feel like social interaction and the difficulties with understanding social norms generally, I feel, is a massive part of being on the spectrum generally. Social communication. When it comes to autism, it's one of the most common traits that gets talked about, on news articles, or when people are describing autism generally. People on the spectrum have difficulty in their communication. So for example, you have autistic people who are non-verbal. So basically, they are not able to say words necessarily. That does not mean they can't communicate. Yes, it's not through words, but you can still communicate via different means, maybe a communication aid, or general gestures that the person is making, or noises. So yeah, when it comes to social communication, there's different types of social communication. There's obviously verbal, where someone is talking, but there's also non-verbal communication, such as hand gestures, and of course body language. Personally, for me, I find social communication generally tricky because I can't tell if someone is happy or sad, based on what they are expressing on their face or by their body language. Someone could say, "Oh, I'm alright, I'm absolutely fine," but they have that expression, which is kind of mixed signals for me, and I just don't understand it. So really, when it comes to facial expressions, tone of voice, all of the stuff that leads into someone being able to communicate, or you understanding someone when it comes to communication, it is a very, very tricky thing sometimes for someone on the spectrum. Of course, this is not the case for everyone on the spectrum. I find social communication tricky because there's just a lot of variables to it, and the way that someone communicates could impact on the social interaction that you have with that person. And really, I feel that social communication and social interaction are a massive part of being on the spectrum, and it's something that is a common theme when you talk to people like myself or out there in the autism community. It is a massive part of it. What traits do you identify with the most? Or are there traits that I didn't talk about in this video that you think would be beneficial to other people? Let me know down below in the comments. But if you want to see me talk about more autism traits, I highly recommend that video. That's right there. And if you enjoyed this one, make sure you hit that like button. Consider subscribing if you want to see more. Stay you, stay indie. I hope you have a great day, guys, and I hope to see you next time.